Here we go again, take two. You are more than enough with your host, Christopher Senior, my wife, Debbie Pender, and a very special guest who I've known for, I guess, over 20 years now, Ebony Maddrey. She's going to tell us about herself, and then we're going to just hop right into the show. So, fire away.
All right. Thank you guys for having me first. And I am, again, Ebony Maddrey, owner and operator of Patchwork Human Services, where we provide mental health services to children and their family throughout the state of Delaware. We are located in Claymont. I have been able to collaborate and bring on a really solid team of clinicians who all focus on different things. So we're not limited in our reach as far as the practice um, because we just didn't want to be boxed in, right? And so currently, our youngest client is 3, and the oldest is about 77. And it just works for us. What else? And then I am currently in school pursuing my doctoral degree in prevention science. And one of the biggest reasons is because when it comes to like just lifing, right, we tend to focus on interventions. And the preventative things are kind of left to the wayside. Like a lot of times we wait until there's an issue or a problem before we attack it. And so that's what kind of drew me towards wanting to study under the guise of prevention science.
All right, you left out your mom, you know, knocking out the box with your kids. I've been following you.
Thank you.
I remember watching your work when we started at Chester High School, and you were working the teenage girls, so you have been doing this for a long time. Inspiring them, encouraging them. Also, remember how you fought through the naysayers. Remember the naysayers? You couldn't do this, you weren't going to do that, this was never going to happen, which is pretty interesting because I've just watched you develop from afar over the years. And I think it's great. We're going to get into this topic today about like why the men stay silent. I guess it's the backbone of the message of what we're talking about, especially African American men. How come when it comes to mental health, we're struggling, but we won't say anything. So I guess my first question would be, do you find that to be true when you're dealing with your clients that most of the men, if you get a lot of men, like what's the percentage? And do they like open up willingly or is it like pulling teeth?
Well, once a man decides to get started with therapy, especially if it's not mandated through the courts, right? A lot of times that's how our Black men get involved in therapy because there's a condition of their probation or a condition of an offense that they have been a part of. But if they come in on their own, like they're already in a state of awareness to know that like, hey, something isn't quite right and I need to unpack this, then, it's like smooth sailing. It's not like pulling teeth because they were able to make the decision on their own. But that would be the minority. That is definitely not the majority because we know just culturally across the board I'm going to say minorities, but I know we're talking about Black folks in particular, but across the board, any type of therapy has always been viewed as taboo, right? It's a thing where we've been reared not to trust it. We've been conditioned to believe that it's not a Black person's issue to need therapy. We tend to work through things in-house. We tend to say, take it to the church. One of the things that I've had the opportunity to begin doing is to offer social emotional workshops and classes to middle schoolers. And one of the therapists in our practice, she's even gone a bit younger than that. Like as it came up in supervision and we're like, okay, well, let's explore that to start reaching kids at the daycare level and the preschool level. And in particularly, I have the opportunity to work with a gender specific school, right, where all of the kids are boys. And so we're able to tap in earlier in life about how important it is to understand your thoughts and your feelings and how to process them effectively, what to do if you're in a crisis. And I think that's what a lot of people in our generation missed, our generation and before. That platform was never offered.
Well,
in the work or the field that you work in, what are some of the warning signs? What do you think some of the warning signs are that somebody needs help?
Acting out behavior, one of the things that I always say, especially working with the younger kids, is that there are no bad kids, right? Things happen, people have experiences that kind of predicate the way that they show up, and so I would say, like, just being angry all the time, fighting, being disrespectful even. um, when we really think about it, like, kids who harm animals, or people who, you know what I mean, like, just
Yeah.
don't think outside themselves and are really kind of stuck in like an egocentric way of being, not really thinking fully about the consequences or being able to connect the dots to all of the what ifs. People who are quiet all the time can, you know what I mean, like, they can present a whole lot of things as well. And when we really think about it, most of the violence that we see, sometimes it comes from those quiet people, those people that isolate. It's almost like we call it like the soda bottle effect, right? So I stuff, and then I get shooken up by anything, and then I explode, and then everybody's looking around like, how did this happen? um People who suddenly are acting out of character, like if there's a super talkative person and then they go silent, right? Those are signs to look for. Or a kid who's pretty mild manner, or an individual who's mild manner who now is very combative, so there's not just one thing to look for, but I would say if we had to hone in on anything, I would say pay more attention to like those sudden changes in behavior.
But you said something that struck a chord with me because I'm trying to get people to understand, as one who works with population from kindergarten to up, you look at some of these kids and you look at some of the men I work with and you see how A connected to B. But nobody seems to be addressing it that way. We wait until the child gets in trouble, or is over the edge, or he becomes a young man, and then we're trying to treat the symptom and not deal with the cause.
Mm-hmm.
I personally think trauma needs to be redefined. And I
Yes.
think mental health needs to be included. Like people do light social emotional learning, but it's like you're doing it, then you impact something, and they're not trained to deal with what you impact. So it's kind of like you get the kid talking, and then you move on.
Yeah.
And because most people who do it is just the curriculum they get. Most of the curriculums I've come across are Eurocentric. They're not even really geared to meet our kids, especially for men. A lot of curriculums I look at for men, because I've developed my own, even in fatherhood, is geared towards women.
Mm-hmm.
And they just slap male in it. So, and you work with, what do you think the threat is, or what's missing? How we allow young men to go through this whole process to become men who are now pretty much dysfunctional?
I think that you're absolutely right. A lot of things is, well, a lot of things are Eurocentric. A lot of the research that has been conducted, it doesn't necessarily include us. And, I feel like a lot of time these programs that get funding to do things, they go in with a one size fits all mindset, when you have to deal with our kids a little differently. You know what I mean? And that doesn't make them less than or bad. It just means that there has to be a different approach, because everything isn't going to necessarily work for them. And it's so funny that you talked about like the naysayer. So kind of going back to that. And I think when you have people that operate in a different capacity and they're able to connect in a different way, they then become the threat, and so then it's the tying of the hands, or you can't operate in that capacity, or you have to report everything. And it's like, some things don't necessarily warrant a report as much as another conversation, or asking the next question, because we've been trained to report everything, right? And then we have the disruption of family systems, we have the disruption of school placement. Like, I think that there's this big pipeline for any type of acting out behavior, kind of almost channels or predisposes a kid to have to go into some sort of alternative placement, when that can be re-triggering, re-traumatizing, versus let's figure out what's really happening here. Why is this behavior so prevalent? And so I think that a lot of things are systemically charged, but it misses the cultural sensitivity that we need in order to bridge the gap to get our kids to where they need to be.
And I see it firsthand because, I work with all populations after school, but I run a lot of programs for men. And when I'm talking to men, a lot of times, these issues they've had for a long time. I mean, they've had these issues for a long time, and they're sharing the group. Like it'll be a group of us together, we gather, and they share, and it's great. But then it's okay, you take the next step. And what I find is, because I'm guilty of this, I go back to when I was a kid, growing up in the hood, and we used to tease people got on the short bus. If you got on the short bus, you was a target. Yeah. If people found out you were actually going to see the social worker or a therapist in the school, it was over. And I think that lack of understanding as youth has followed us into adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
So we still have therapies for crazy people. Therapy is not an Afrocentric thing, or we still stick to the old time thing. What happens in our house stays in our house.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you move men past that? Because men suffer in silence, and a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, yeah, most of the time it impacts their relationships with their spouses or with their children. I deal with guys who can't say I love you to their spouses because all this stuff has happened in their life, and they just grew up scarred. They never dealt with. So how do you deal with men like that who say, they need help, but they don't seem to recognize that they need help? But I'm coming because I have to come. I'm making my wife happy, or like you said, I'm the court mandate. How do you deal with it?
I think by creating spaces, like safe spaces for them to be vulnerable, to be vocal, modeling for them what that looks like. I think identify and labeling all of the things that you stated, like, okay, let's look at all of the failed relationships. Let's look at your relationships with your kids. Who's at the center, right? And then it's like the onion theory, right? And so let's start peeling back those layers. Like, how did you become hardened to not saying I love you? How did you become hardened to all I have to do is provide? I did a workshop with a group of fifth graders, and I had the boys identify so we were talking about how society treats boys and girls differently, right? So you might do one thing at home, another thing in school, but when you're out in society, the consequences look different, right? And so we had them go down a list of like there's just ways in which society treats girls and boys differently. And then we stretched it a little further to ask, what are some of the responsibilities that you believe have been placed upon boys? And do you think it's fair or not? Almost half of the room talked about the need to be providers, the need to work hard, the need to be the only one paying all the bills, the need to be strong, the need to just to be successful and what that looked like. And so they said that they felt like girls get passes, right? And Deb, we work just as hard, right? But for these fifth graders, they couldn't allow their brains to go there. And so I asked them a question about, so what about when things get heavy or when you feel like there are too many responsibilities? And if your plate is full, how do we start divvying that up, or how do we start clearing some of that up? And so then I asked them like to think about something that's heavy for you. And most adults would say, oh, you're in the fifth grade, there's nothing heavy for you. Yeah. When I tell you guys, these boys started to unpack, and one of the little boys that was in this particular group, all of the other kids were saying like he's the fighter out of this class, right? So he's always fighting, like nobody messes with him. He was the first one to raise his hand to share something heavy, and he began to cry. They never seen this boy cry unless it was out of frustration, right? And he began to cry, and I just held space for him. And for me, it was important to hold space for him, to have everybody else pause, to model for his teachers and the people that work with him, like how important it is to offer these types of spaces, because we don't know what kids are coming home from or what they're going home to. And one of the sentiments I tell kids, especially when it comes to teasing, is that we all go home to something different. Mm-hmm. So we don't have a right to tease anybody or to call anybody crazy, right? Going back to the short bus, when we were younger, it was a classroom at the beginning of the building. As soon as you walked in,
Yeah, yep, you were in that class. Yep. You
right.
was in that
And
class.
so now that I'm older and I do the work, it's like thinking about those young men, half of them didn't need to be in that class.
No.
They just needed a way to channel the emotions that they had pent up. And had they had a way, I think that even just their educational experiences would have played out completely different. So I think it's that. I think being able to create safe spaces to allow men to be vulnerable, giving them the pass to say, hey, it's okay. It doesn't make you weak. And I share often that for a man in particular to be able to express himself in a healthy way, like that's one of his superpowers. Like that's one of the strongest things that he could ever do in life. And I know a lot of times I sound like I'm coming across as the mama bear, but it's a real thing, you know, and really just trying to exercise what that looks like.
But I think for most men, because a perfect example, I probably deal with about 50 guys regular between Monday nights and between once a month on Saturdays. And when we're together, that safe place, they share stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always amazed because a new guy will come in and after 5 minutes, he's looking around, he's pouring his guts out.
Yeah.
So the safe place is important. But if I look at the big picture, I see how it gets stifled because I look at some of the young men I work with. They don't, like the young man you talked about, they never have a place where they can express themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Where they can cry or whatever, or just really get a chance to say what's on my mind. A lot of them told me, because we talked about depression, was their mom told them, and a lot of times this, and I'm not saying this in a certain way, but a lot of times single moms put so much pressure on these boys to be the man of the house that they're growing up believing that they're the man of the house. You 10 years old. So now by the time you get 20, you really believe that, you got to be this serious person all the time and you're taking care of business. I have kids who say, well, I gotta drop out of school to get a job, because I'm the man of the house. So I think the pressure comes, society doesn't help, because if you're an athlete and you cry, I think it's the coolest thing in the world. If you're an athlete.
Yes.
If you do anything else and you cry, something wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you suggest somebody overcome that stigma? Because I hear everything you say, but everything I see, like I use the analogy, even Superman has kryptonite.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I say even Superman was Clark Kent.
Yes.
But most men think we got to be Superman all the time.
Right. And I think when we think about all the time, it's important to educate individuals on the whole concept of code switching, right? And so I can be strong in some areas and weak in others, right? So I can be strong and still express myself. That doesn't necessarily mean, again, that I'm a softie. It doesn't mean. And so I think helping men to embrace what they're feeling and helping them to understand that if I don't deal with what I'm feeling, it is going to come out in other ways, because it always does. Whether that's you being explosive or super aggressive or, isolating and sitting in the house with the shades closed, just doing just enough to survive, to show up for work, to get your paycheck, to pay your bills, and then you're right back into your cave, right? I don't want to call the man caves the little caves, but you're right back into your cave. And so I think, again, like just modeling it more and helping to unlearn what we've always been taught was that if a boy cries or if a man cries, that he's soft, that he's weak, that he's emotional, that he's super sensitive. I think there's nothing more beautiful than seeing a man who exhibits strength, but also is able to tap into being able to show his ability to nurture not only himself, but the things that and the people that he's responsible for, right? Like, I think that's huge, but because the conversations aren't being had. When you think about the single parents putting their boys in position to feel like they're the man of the house, those are conversations that I have in parenting groups, because a kid is a kid. A kid should never be placed under the label of being the man of the house. Like when my kids were growing up, people weren't allowed to call them like the man of the house. No, they're not the men of the house. They're my children. And we're working as a unit to get these things done, but they are far from being the man of the house, because the man of the house is capable of paying bills, right? The man of the house, and so it's not allowing certain labels to be placed upon your kids early on. And I think again that just comes with a shift in mindset. Like it's okay to be the child of a single parent and still know your role as a kid. I think those are the conversations that are warranted. I was going to say something. Okay. And also I think so many people are put into that parentified role early. So going back to single parenting, right? If it's just me, and I'm home and my mom is dealing with depression or my mom is having financial difficulties, right? And she's in the bed in the dark. Now I feel the need. I have to carry her. I have to carry the weight of her. I have to carry the weight of my peers. I have to try to figure out a way to get some money to bring into the house. So now, yeah, I do feel like I'm the man of the house because I'm covering what's happening over here. I think about if there's a death even in the family, right? So sometimes kids are thrown into the parentified role, which is something that's completely out of their control. And all they know is, I got to keep my siblings together. They're not going to go to school and say, we had this major loss. I have to keep my siblings together. They're going to deal with that on their own. So those are the conversations where they're saying, oh, I'm going to have to drop out of school because I need to get some money, and going back to what we said earlier, asking another question. That's a sudden change, right? So if we have a student who's showing up for school all the time and then suddenly they're saying, oh, Mr. Pender, I'm gonna have to drop out, or, school's not for me. Well, school was for you for the last 11 years. So what changed? Just having that conversation. And again, going back to just being the bridge, I view all of us as like the planks on a drawbridge, right? Or like a wooden bridge. And so it's like we're at the center plank, but then we have to connect all of the planks outward to make sure people have what they need in order to get to whatever side it is that they need to get to.
Yeah. Well, the suicide rate, do you think it's high, or why is it so high? Again, I guess it's because communication, lack of communication, and people feeling like they're alone, I guess, all of the time. That leads to they have no one to talk to, no one to express their feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah. But do you think, have you seen a trend? Is it a high trend in your area of work?
It is a high trend. I think that going back to lack of coping skills, lack of feeling comfortable enough to say, hey, I'm struggling here, like I'm drowning, and I'm a visual person. So I always try to give analogies of something that you could see in real time. So imagine somebody that jumps into the pool and can't swim. Everybody around is going to see that person struggling. But if I'm just trying to do life, and life is lifing in a way where I'm sinking, nobody's going to know that I'm sinking, right? And so I think it's so important to pay attention to those things. But the rate is so high, and especially for men. And when we think about even statistically, the highest rate of suicide is like middle-aged and up white men, right? And so that's documented. Our rates are high too, but it doesn't get as much notoriety, right? It's just, oh, so-and-so passed away. And then there's a stigma of saying so-and-so committed suicide. So then the family creates a different narrative, right? And so that's a real thing, because it's like there's this forbidden thing about it, and it's like a major sin amongst minorities, right? So it's like, I don't want the world to know that so-and-so committed suicide. So now I create this thing. So then we kind of teach a thing too. And so I think that the rates are high because, again, men are carrying so much. There's so much responsibility. So imagine a man who has been out of work for a little bit, and his wife or his girlfriend, the mother of his children, is nagging him like, you need to. If you were a man, you would da 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 da. The kids, blah 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 blah. Right. So now I'm being stretched in all of these places when the person that's supposed to be my helpmeet isn't holding space for me. The person that's supposed to be my safe space isn't like saying, babe, I get it, or I got it, or we'll figure this out together. It's very rare that we'll figure this out together as much as the you need to do this, you should be doing this, a real man would, and all of those negative things that come. And so I think, and this is just personal for me, and when I think about raising boys, right, you know, we equip our kids a little differently because now we know better, and it follows the sentiment of when you know better, you do better, and helping them to understand that in life things are going to come up. But the resiliency factor, right? What does that look like? How do we equip you with being able to be resilient even in the space where it feels like the world is crashing down on you? And so, yeah, I think that's why the rates are high and escalating. I think access to social media, right? So going back to when we were younger, if there was a suicide that took place, you only knew about it through word of mouth, right?
Yeah.
Now the reach is broader with social media and TikTok and YouTube and, you know, all of this stuff. And it's intertwined into cartoons. So little kids know what suicide is, right? And then it sparks curiosity, right? And I think for kids, they don't understand that an attempt could mean it's final, right? And even for adults, sometimes the attempts are a cry for help, not that they want it to be final, but what they fail to realize is it's like playing Russian roulette, right?
Yeah.
And so it's important not to take it lightly. So if someone is expressing, because sometimes people will vocalize, I could just, you know, do whatever. Okay, well, let's talk about that. If a kid says it, oh, we're going to take this serious. Let's go get evaluated. And I tell parents that all the time, don't sweep it under the rug, right? Because you never know the day or the time when something
right.
takes place. Yes.
It's so much to unpack there. I'm gonna work backwards.
Okay.
So to me, because of all the stuff I do, I think our suicide rate is much higher because African American men commit suicide differently.
Yes.
It's not always through self-inflicted. Some of them drink themselves to death. Some of them use drugs. Some of our younger men do stuff they knew could lead to death. It's like, I don't care. I want to die anyway because I hear, you know, I'm not going to live to 21 anyway. You know, what I have to live for. You know, so they do it differently, but they still do it. I also think is the stigma, like you said, is underreported. You know, because we don't want anybody to know because it becomes personal now that our family is crazy. And I also think it goes back to we don't get help because it's appearance. We always picture the African American male as a tough, rough guy. We do. That's just the image people get.
Yes.
And we associate strength, you talked about it, with being physically strong. We don't think about it mentally or socially or emotionally. We don't, because we're not taught that.
Right.
You know, if you look at TV, you know, Homer Simpson is the longest running dad on TV. And if you get a lot of dads on TV, they're silly. You know, you got to go back to the Cosbys to find a dad that was kind of solid.
Yeah.
You know, so even the visual thing we get now are different. And social media has such a weight on it that I think that puts pressure on people because for some reason they don't understand that social media is not real. You can be whatever you want to. But the guys say, well, this guy knock out the box. He's taking care of his wife. He take care of kids. Why can't that be me? You know, and we put pressure on. We do. We put pressure on ourselves. And I know when I had cancer and they told me I need to go to therapy, I was like, oh, therapy, you know, for emotions. It's all, man, my man's man. I'm doing therapy, you know?
Yeah.
No, you do, usually. But then you start hitting them depression scares. It's like, okay, well, you know, luckily my wife is understanding because you don't want to go back and admit that, man, I was wrong on 2 counts. I was wrong. I didn't need it. And I'm wrong because I was impacting me. But everybody doesn't have that. And there's a person who reached the sociologist who committed suicide, who I saw, we talked about a variety of things. I saw him down with me one time. And before he did it, we were texting, you know, just little simple things. He was saying how well he's doing. Unbeknownst to me, because somebody shared this with me, that typically people who are about to commit suicide, they come to peace with it. That's what they're going to do. You know, not peace with life, but they come to terms. And I never knew that. See, now in talking to you, I start to hear the different signs. You just think somebody's getting better because they say it. You know, and the second thing that I learned was, didn't notice either, that most people commit suicide really believe the people they're leaving behind are better off without them.
Yes.
And that was mind-boggling to me because I'm thinking all the time, I'm thinking opposite. The trauma you cause people, the people that hurt, And then they were like, nah, this is what people think about. Because the person I was talking to thought about suicide. And he was telling me how he was digesting all this stuff. So what would you say to a man who's going through that? You know, because they can have, because appearances, we get at appearances. We got the car, we got the wife, we got the family, but that inside of us, man, is just, it's constantly talking. It's constantly telling us that we're not enough. It's constantly telling us that, you know, we're not where we're supposed to be. You know, I'm this age and I should be here. You know, and then, so what do you think?
I think I would say to that is just like the title of your show, you are more than enough. And so many times men don't get to hear that, right? You are loved. You matter to me, right? I know what you are going through, right? Like I'm here for you. So I think creating those spaces, but then, you know, we have men that are like, I don't even know what to do with you saying that you're here for me because I've never had that, right? So that could be a little scary. And are you going to use it against me if I let my guard down to let you in, right? And so the trust factor is huge when it comes to that. But I think as women and as people in general connected to the male species, that we keep trying, we keep hammering away at that, right? To affirm them. I think also when you think about, so suicide is very near and dear to me, right? So when I was 11, my uncle committed suicide and we were all at the house. And he was a well-known man and like very prestigious and upstanding. And this one particular night, so he had developed a drug addiction, right? And this one particular night, he stole something from my grandmother. And for him, that was the lowest of the low. And he's like, I'm done. And he committed suicide in a house full of people, you know? And when we think about the traumatic impact of that, even going back to like just the whole scope of our conversation today, there was no therapy. There were no real discussions. You know, the kids who were present, I being one, we went skating that night because all the family knew was to keep it normal. We need to have a sense of normalcy. But what do you say to a kid who witnessed their uncle's limp body hanging? You know what I mean? So it's like, again, so if there is no discussions, and I just thank God that I am who I am, right? And so, but there are others in the family that were stuck in that space for a really, really long time because there was no movement with the emotions from that day. And so think about being 11, becoming a 35-year-old, 40-year-old man, and you're still stuck in that space because there was nothing to help you move that along, you know? And so I'm very vocal about all things. I'm constantly checking in. You good? And I think we have to ask the next question, because what do we normally say? Yeah, I'm all right. I'm good. And especially men, I'm good. I don't need you checking on me. Like, I'm good, you know? And then if I'm not good and I don't want to talk, and while I don't know, Deb, if Chris has done this to you, but you know, we could be a little annoying in our check-ins, right? But just not letting up off of the gas. So we know that, right? But it's, again, we're coming from a good place. We want to check on you. We want to make sure that you have what you have in order to get over whatever the hump is or whatever the challenge is. And so I think for people to just be adamant in the reach, in the check-in, right? Because it's easy to say, oh, you don't want to be bothered with me? I'm gonna leave you alone, right? But if I know that this is out of character for you, I'm gonna keep showing up.
But I think for most men, it's like, and I'll speak for myself, you got this woman who you love so dearly. You got these kids who you just, you know, and everybody's used to seeing you a certain way.
Yes.
And then you add your perception to how they see you, because you never really ask them. You just assume that everybody sees you as a rocket, you're rocking. So it's like, do I want to tell people I have a kryptonite? You know, because if they finally got a kryptonite, they may see me less than, or my son Chris loves to say this, and I'm assuming this generation is, they'll weaponize it. You know, something that happened later on, they'll bring it up, you know, or they'll say, well, you said it, you know, if you were a man. And that phrase right there is like punching the guy in the stomach. You know, that is terrible. I think those things make it hard to tell somebody who you think sees you a certain way, because men are not thinking she understands the intimate side of me. She understands the soft side. Men are thinking, no, she's the macho side. So we don't want to be vulnerable because we don't know how our spouse is going to react. We don't. Real quick, I know we run out of time. It's like when I sit down with couples and counsel, the first question I ask is, "What's your definition of love?" And 90% of the time, I get two totally different definitions, and that often determines how hard you fight for your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing I would say is how much do you love yourself? Because if you don't love yourself,
you can't love her.
Yeah. So
you can't love them. Yeah.
If you can't answer those first two questions, you're constantly trying to be something you're not. And I'm assuming this person right here wants me to always be up here.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, how would you, as we get ready to close, can you give like a couple coping mechanisms to guys like that who feel like, look, man, hey, how do I deal with it?
I think the biggest one is, like we said earlier, unlearning what you were taught. Mm-hmm. Understanding that even as a man, you are human too. You feel, you bleed, you know what I mean? You have thoughts mm-hmm. about things. I think also having the conversations and being okay and saying, well, I know I was reared to not talk about how I'm feeling, but I need my kids to see that I'm human too. Mm-hmm. Right. And so being able to do that helps the next generation while you're healing in real time. One of the things that I say often, and I probably sound so redundant saying it, is going back to when you said when the kids will use it against you. So not internalizing when they do, or when people attempt to use a thing against you, because guess what? You only have that information because I shared it. And because I shared it, you can't use it against me. You don't get to use it against me. Mm-hmm. And so for you to have a Teflon cape and to say, okay, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I'm going to go out back and grill these burgers. You know what I mean? Because it is easy. It is easy to kind of stay in a space or to stay in your head like, I don't believe this little boy just said this to me. Mm-hmm. Or that's just why I don't share with people. No, you keep sharing, because we want to change the narrative, especially for our Black men. It's so important that we continue these types of conversations to say, listen, you don't have to suffer in silence. In the great words of Michael Jackson, you are not alone. You are absolutely not alone. And even in those moments when you feel like you're alone, I promise you, you're not, whether it be a physical person or your higher being. Right. Mm-hmm. And so whoever folks pray to, it's like you have to believe in something greater than yourself, but you are not alone. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we did a retreat last year. It was called like just out in the wilderness. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we have to go through a period of being in the wilderness in order to gain clarity, and it's okay to say to the people around you, like, I need a moment, or I need some time, or not today. So I think setting solid boundaries for men and being able to really stand on that, because only when your social battery is running low, right? Like, yeah, we can guess and make assumptions, or we can offer and say, babe, you need to get some rest, or, I would like to do this, but just leaning in and embracing those opportunities to do so. I would say, and don't knock it until you try it, right? So I think trying therapy, trying support groups, again, because you will be so surprised at how many people are going through something that you're going through. And you're like, dang, man, I thought I was the only one. Like, it's 3 other people in this room that are going through similar things.
Yeah, definitely.
So, and it just takes one brave soul, I did an activity, and I'm gonna stop because I'll keep talking, y'all. But I did an activity just in general. We always talk about affirmations. We never talk about the weightiness of what we're carrying. And so I had people put on a sticky something heavy that they were carrying, something that was worrying them, something that was weighing them down. And they didn't have to put their names on it. They just put whatever that thing is. Some people filled out 4 stickies, but they just tacked it up on the wall. And as other people came and they wrote down their thing, they were able to look at the wall and say, all these people are going through the same thing. And I just kept pushing the sentiment. You are not alone,
Well, we got to definitely set up a part two.
Okay.
We wind down because I know everybody got stuff to do. Thank you for taking the time off to be here. We definitely got to connect. So I'll
Absolutely.
definitely, man. We'll get part two together. Thank you so much. As we
Thank
close
you.
out, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Great episode. One of my very good friends. I'm going to call a doctor. I know it's coming, but
It's coming. It's coming.
thank you. Appreciate you so much. And yo, check us out. This show is actually going to be on Monday night, 7 o'clock. So if you're out there tuned in, give me a thumbs up. Let us know you like it, and we'll keep it going. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Listen up, yo. You got the fire inside. More than enough. Just let the vibe lie. Young kings and queens, it's time to rise up. Ain't no need to doubt, just gotta size up. Just look in the mirror, see that shining glow. We built for the hustle, let that passion show. Titled you a more, yeah, that's the